It's now 4:30. It's November 7th. I'm going to call this meeting of the Moorhead Public Service Commission to order. Could I have a motion, please, concerning our agenda?
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda.
Thank you for doing that. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Could I have a similar motion with regard to the consent agenda, please?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Are there any customers to be heard? Seeing none. Any recognitions, Mr. Schwant?
No, sir.
I like that. That's not going to continue for long. Any old business, Mr. Schwant?
No, sir.
Well, I see that you've got something on here for old
Okay,
business.
sorry. Yes, I do. Yes. This is the resolution in support of the permanent flood protection for the metropolitan area. And it was suggested at the last commission meeting that we put together a resolution. And we don't do resolutions like the whereas, because our chairman doesn't really like it that way. So this is
You
simply...
talk more like a lawyer than I do.
Yeah, this is simply a resolution in paragraph form, and it basically has some whereases to it, and then basically the recommendation is that the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the Metro Flood Diversion Authority, and the Corps get together and address the differences and in the current design, and then provide that permanent flood protection that everybody needs.
Okay, and I take it this is similar in nature to the resolution that was recently passed by the Moorhead City Council, is it not?
It is similar to that. Yes, it is.
And I think it was Mr. Anderson who asked that we put this on our agenda. And so, Mr. Anderson, I'm going to turn to you and see if this says what you think it should say.
I did, and I appreciate the effort by the staff to provide this. It looks basically fine to me. I thought it was a little soft on the diversion portion, but you finally get to it in the final paragraph where we are at least urging the diversion authority and others to get together and work out the differences. I guess the one suggestion that I would make to the group is that we make the opening line stronger. And it's really, maybe it's just semantics, but I would suggest that in the opening line, we simply say the Moorhead Public Service Commission supports permanent flood protection. Okay. And eliminate all the would like to comment and so forth, and just say that we support it.
Okay.
Other than that, that would be my only specific recommendation. Open to any other comments anybody else has.
For those of you who weren't here during those floods or who were not sitting as a member of the Public Service Commission at that time, I can tell you that for those of us who have aged since then, we certainly don't want to go through what we've gone through in years past. For anybody to imply that sandbagging is a way to take care of the people of this area is ridiculous. I, for one, would like it to be much more strongly worded when it comes to the diversion. But I can certainly live with what we have here because we do need permanent flood protection for this area. There's no doubt about it. And anybody who doesn't realize that is sadly mistaken. And I agree that these groups do have to get together and resolve all these various differences that they have. So I would feel comfortable with the comments you made and going further. And Rolf, do you have something to say?
I actually have a question to Bill. Most of our power comes from the west, right? So we have a substation out west of Fargo. Would that be in or outside the area that's going to be protected by the diversion?
It's out.
I think it's outside, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is outside.
It's outside the Cheyenne.
And we did comment on that earlier, but I can check on that because that could be another whereas, could be another paragraph.
Yeah, because it's not just about. We have very specific reasons to say we need to be protected here from an energy supply standpoint, because we have the electricity comes from the west. So.
And for those of us who have been here and we were making day-to-day determinations, working very closely with city staff as well. I can tell you that the people sitting in the back, Joe and everybody else on the electrical side and everybody on the water side did an absolutely fabulous job in keeping this community up and running, and under no circumstances were they going to allow anybody's electricity to be turned off unless there was a life-threatening reason for it. So, yeah, we don't want to have to go through those times again. John, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I've read this several times, and I would prefer the way it is written because it talks about permanent flood protection versus giving support to either one of the many areas that we've already had heard of discussion about how flood protection should be done, either positive or negative here for it. So I think with us going into a statement of a permanent flood protection would be a good choice on my thoughts.
Okay, so with, we have a motion to accept this resolution, please. David?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the resolution with the suggestion that I made with the opening line.
Yep.
Okay, do I have a second to that?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Thank you, everybody. At 5:30, we will take a bit of a break to have our public hearing. So I just want to make sure that everybody was aware of that. Reports. Heidi, what do you have to report from the City Council?
I don't have a report. Just to tell everybody to go out and vote tomorrow,
Absolutely.
Again?
unless you've already voted.
I already voted, so yeah, okay.
It is, after all, not only our patriotic obligation, but it is something that people have died for. So yes, in fact, we should go out there and vote, particularly this year.
That's right.
And there are a lot of good people serving this community who hopefully the residents of Moorhead will remember that not only is this a national election and a state election, it is a city election, and there are some good people running. Make your choice. We won't tell you how to make that choice, but please make your choice and make your vote count. Members of the Public Service Commission, anything to report? Okay. Mr. General Manager.
Just a couple of things, a couple that are in the report, the written report. Dennis and I have been asked to do some presentations on community solar, and so we will be heading to a couple of those places. University of Minnesota is interested in that, and it's basically a bunch of utilities getting together and talking about how we're each doing our programs. So I think that's good. And then annually we do the Red River Water Festival, and our chemist is, and one of our dispatchers is pictured. And if you didn't have a chance to look at those, I think it's nice to look at that. So our employees are out and about doing some of those activities, which I think is kind of nice. And then last Thursday, and Dave Anderson was actually there, I wasn't, the city had their growth area plan. Maybe you want to talk just a little bit about that, because that's an important, well, I'll start. That's an important area. Basically, the city gets together and looks at all the infrastructure and, infrastructure basically that's needed for growth in the next number of decades. And they do this from time to time, and the current growth area plan is being updated. And they basically go through and talk about all of those issues. The perimeter of the city is where they generally would be looking to. And of course, we've had growth on the south side and the east side, primarily of Moorhead, with the addition of schools in those areas. We're particularly concerned about it because we have water and electric infrastructure that needs to be added. And we also have service territory issues when we expand beyond our current service territory borders. We also do master plans on the water and electric side. And I believe water's in 2017. You're looking at a master plan update, something like that. And the electric master plan is underway as we speak. And we use this type of information on where the city thinks they're going to grow in order to plan our substations and water towers and those types of things. So anyway, that meeting was on Thursday. I believe Chris is on the committee, Travis is on the committee, Joe was there as well, so thanks. If there's any questions, you know, we can, I know Chris was there as well, so
Joe was there.
Joe was there.
I would only add that it was well attended by the general public. So a lot of interest and a lot of people there. And I think the conversation was wide-ranging from services to streets and layout of neighborhoods. And Dr. Z was there. And he was very open with a number of comments about some of the street alignments and some of those issues that we constantly deal with. So
Yep.
it was a good meeting.
There's an item here that appears to have been inadvertently placed on the consent agenda, and that's item 10, that I'd asked to be taken off the consent agenda previously when the agenda was put together. I'm not too sure procedurally what we have to do to take that back off so we can discuss it.
Where's Les when you need him?
Where's Les when you need him?
I think that if everyone's in agreement, you can just make a motion and take it off the
Okay,
agenda.
I'd like a motion to take that off the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that takes us to item 10.
No, actually, one more,
not yet.
What?
Budget Committee. There's one more report.
In 9.
Oh, okay.
No, hold on. John has a question.
Okay.
Bill, in your report here, number 1, it refers to that you've been asked to join the utility discussion group as far as to share your insights. And I think as far as what we had talked before, as that you should be cautious of spreading your time so short, and maybe there might be staff that could be in these positions here. So it's more of just a summary of that and a consideration of that if we have other members of staff to share that experience. And
Yep. No, that's a good point. Dennis has actually spoken to this group previously, and then because I spoke at the Missouri River annual meeting, they specifically requested me this time. So Dennis and I are going to go together to this one because it is a new enough topic. But yeah, point well taken, and we do watch that. Dennis has done a lot of the presentations.
Okay. Now we move down to item 9D, which is to accept report number 3 on the 2017 budget. Who's speaking to this? Nancy? Bill? Take your pick.
Oh, yeah, Nancy, I was looking for her down here, but yeah, Nancy's over here.
Nancy Lund, Admin and Finance Manager. So we are well into our budget process and still waiting for finalization of a couple numbers from our purchase power and transmission providers. So as we work towards those, just a reminder that these numbers are preliminary at this point. The Budget Committee will still have several issues to work through as all those numbers firm up in the next couple of weeks. But right now, where we're at on the electric division, we'll start with electric, is right now we're proposing the Budget Committee is proposing a 4.5% rate increase, which would yield about $44.2 million in revenue. Of that, a total revenues of about that amount. Of that 4.5% increase, just a reminder that in 2015, we had a 5% budget or 5% rate increase projected, which we rolled out over 3 years. So in 2015, instead of doing a 5%, we did a 1%. In 2016, we did a 2.5%. So we still have 2.5% of the 5% to roll into rates in 2017. So of the 4.5%, 2.5% is covering purchase power increases from 2015. The other 2% of the rate increase is needed to recover or to produce revenues for a couple different sources. One of those is being the great fluctuations or increases we're seeing in purchase power cost. Right now, our latest projection is that purchase power costs in 2017 are going up just short of $1 million annually. And the other big driver on the rate increase will be the need to replace some revenues that we previously thought we were receiving from Southwest Power Pool. So making up $1 million or over $1 million from Southwest Power Pool and increasing our revenues to cover our purchase power costs. So today, that increase, total increase is sitting at 4.5%, which will yield about, to the average user, the 4.5% increase would be about $4.10 per customer per month. And again, waiting for the finalization of some numbers for the Budget Committee to take a look at those numbers again and come up with a final recommendation on that rate increase on the electric side. Any questions on what or on electric?
Have we calculated the impacts to our larger customers?
Overall, I mean, it should be an overall 4.5% increase. Some of the larger customers may see slightly smaller increases due to their power factors and things like that, so it may not be quite as high as that 4.5%. But generally, across the board, that's going to be what the increase is going to be.
Okay, Bill, I think that you mentioned to me during our conversations last week that you had, in fact, talked to one or more of our large customers. How did those meetings go?
We generally try and talk to all of our largest customers. Dennis Eisenbrown basically talks to each one of them or sends email and tries to talk to all of them. We had a conference call with our second largest by revenue, the customer, and I expect them to be at the commissioner at the rate hearing tonight. And we've talked to them about the size of the increase and where all the pieces of the increase come from, and I think they're going to have some comments tonight. So we're working with one that particularly has concerns with the electric increase, and again, I'm expecting them to be here tonight. But we went over quite a bit of the detail, and so I think their meeting tonight with us will be mainly to comment, not to look for any solutions other than, you know, if there's anything we can do to reduce or spread out the increase.
Okay. John?
Nancy, just looking at the residential fact sheet here that's out, there was a reference that we're looking about a little over $700,000 increase, and now you referenced approximately $1 million. Is that updated information that you have?
In purchase power costs?
Yep.
Which page was that on?
This is on the first page, section 2, just below the electric rate increase, the second paragraph, it says purchase power transmission, approximately $717,000.
Oh, yeah, 717 is an updated number. So we started out looking at that. I think the original number that we had on that early on in the process was, let me see, 1.2 million, and we're down. So we've got some finalized numbers from some of the suppliers, so we're down to a $717,000
All right, maybe I misunderstood. I thought you said we're looking at about $1 million increase in your presentation.
717 is the correct number.
Okay, thank you.
717 on purchase power, and, you know, about a $1.3 million decrease in Southwest Power Pool monies. Sorry about that.
And there's a number of moving parts. If you remember, we from Western Area Power Administration, we had some discounts that we were looking to maybe have them phase out versus taking them out. Unfortunately, they are, and they already have started, and they will be removing those discounts actually retroactively to October of 15. So that's about $400,000 that wasn't anticipated. The other thing that wasn't anticipated, which is good news, was they were looking at a 3 to 5 mil decrease in their rates, and we set up our budget with 3 mils, and they ended up doing 5 mils of a decrease. So that was good news. So we've had those two kind of cancel each other out. We haven't gone into a lot of detail on that with the Budget Committee yet, and we'll be meeting with the Budget Committee, and there'll be maybe a few more things that happen over the next few weeks that we can work, that we can look at. So as what's typical at this time of year, it seems like these numbers don't come in until we're partway through the process. So Budget Committee will have to have one more meeting.
One thing I would like to see is, this going back thing, I would like to look at our contract with WAPA to see whether they actually can go back. Usually when you make a contract, you kind of, stick to it, and if you want to change it, you don't go backward. So I'd like to, or maybe understand from them why they believe they can actually do that. So, I mean, if they phase those discounts out, that's something we have to live with, but the going back is just something that I don't think we should just take, lying down here. So let's look at the agreement to see whether they actually can do that.
I think what we'll find too, we're expecting the final letter from WAPA on that in the next several days too, and I think they will reference some rates that were adopted at the beginning of 2015 that allowed them to make that decision whenever they finally made that decision. So I don't think we'll find when we go back in our contract the actual reference to those discounts we were getting, but they did clarify and talk about those discounts being up for elimination anytime January 2015 or later. It was just...
I mean, I get that point, but I would like to see the language that says they can make decision today and go back and go back a year. I mean, I get the fact that they can eliminate them, but the going backwards is the thing that I would like to see where they think they have that authority. And if they do, they do. If they don't, then we'll fight them on it. I mean, if you guys want it.
Right? Anything you say, Rob.
He's bigger.
What's that?
He's bigger than I am.
Okay,
That's what he wants.
so before we go on to Nancy's comments on the water rates and the water budget, is there anything that the two of you from the Budget Committee want to add to the conversation at this stage?
From my point of view, I'd say I'd urge a little patience over the next few weeks yet. We're not done. We have some numbers yet to crunch. I think it's going to be a better scenario by the time we maybe get to the next meeting. But certainly by the time we're ready to approve a budget. What we have done is we've been very careful not to raise expectations for a better deal yet. But I think
But you're hopeful?
But I think we've got a better deal coming. And so
Okay.
while we are going to have a hearing this evening to talk about what it is that we've proposed thus far, I think we're going to improve on this before the end of the year.
And when I do my presentation for the rate hearing, you'll see our projections in one of the last slides, and it has the 4.5 in there, and then I believe it has, what, 3.5?
2018, right now we're projecting 3%, and 2019, 2% rate increases. So
And then, yeah, so it actually is out 4 years, I think, because it has another 2 on that as well, doesn't it? So a 4.5, 3, 2, and 2. And so you will, if we can, look at the numbers a bit more and drop that 4.5 would be nice. You can spread some of that out a bit, but then there's always the risk that you're going to have some expenses that pop up. So I mean, it'll be a discussion for the rate, or for the Budget Committee.
Well, and if we spread out using reserves, I mean, that's another issue because our reserves are so low. I don't think that's an area we should go into right now, right?
Yeah.
We did that, because we did that 3 years ago, didn't we, when we started spreading out the...
when we spread the 5% over 3 years, we dipped into reserves to do that too.
Yeah.
So we are in the replenish and build reserve mode right now. So we would like to meet our goal of 170 days of reserves on hand within the next couple of years.
Yep.
Okay. Nancy, you want to speak to the water rates, or the water portion of the budget, rather?
On the water rates, much smaller revenues that we're talking about, but with the 6.5% rate increase, we're looking at a increasing total revenues up to about $8.3 million. In 2017, just about half of that is going to go towards capital improvements and infrastructure improvements on the water side. So we've got some big investments in water main replacement that really drives our rates. On an annual basis, we invest about 17% of our revenues back into the water main asset management plan and replacement of those water mains throughout the community. So that's a really big number there. So about $4 million is going towards capital improvements in 2017. The water revenues are also dependent on weather conditions or how much rain we've got on an annual basis too. So the water revenues do fluctuate based on rainfall. Right now we're sitting in a year where we've had some good sales. Normally those sales then, instead of being used to hold down rates the next year, get plowed back into the capital improvement programs. and everything. So if we're talking a good year, we might be talking 100,000 or 150,000 of additional revenues to put towards our replacement plans. So on the reserve side, the water division is fully funded with its reserve balances, and we'll have a little bit of this money this year to spend towards next year's investments in that. Overall, I think we're in about the third year of five 6.5% rate increases to fund the infrastructure on the water side. So this year's 6.5% increase would be an increase of about $2.06 per average residential customer. And we've got 2 more years of 6.5% increases forecast in 2018 and 2019 to get our infrastructure up to where it needs to be.
Nancy, when we shifted in Oakport Township, when those residents came online as Moorhead residents, what did that do to our revenue flow at that point?
On the customer side, so those former Oakport residents, they saw a 50% decrease in the commodity price of their water. So they saw a good decrease come into the system. On the revenue side, I think the number was about $40,000 of revenue decrease that we saw as they came into the city and paid in the city rates versus outside city rates.
Okay. Any questions for Nancy?
Well, maybe one comment to make. So both on electric and water, there's no budget item for the underpass. Okay, we're doing some engineering that we are paying for right now, but there's, just to be clear again, there's no item for the underpass. If that comes to pass, that needs to be funded somehow differently. So
On the electric side. On the water side, we've had assurances from the city that it is in their plan to pay water relocation.
That's excellent to hear. Okay,
Yep.
so electric side then.
Yep.
Okay. So I misspoke. One question to Chris, if I may. Are we okay on the overlay project, the big overlay project the city is going to do next year for the water main replacement, 20th and 20th? Are we in sync with the city?
Chris Knudsen, Water Division Manager. Yes, we're still in kind of design talks in terms of how it's going to go, but conceptually, yes, we're on the same page for work that's expected to be done.
Because I'm a numbers guy. How many kilometers is that? Or miles, whatever.
What's a kilometer?
I know, you guys are just so behind.
Where are you from?
It's about a mile. I think we'll be at about 1.5 miles.
Okay. So we'll be right in line with what we're trying to do every year, right?
Yep. In that 1 to 2 mile per year range is typically where we're going to be. This past year was a big year because of Sims, but on a running average, it'll fall in about that 1.5 to 2 miles a year range.
And we'll have about, what, 10 years left on the cast iron?
About 10 years left. Yep.
So we'll have a big party, right?
Yes.
Any further questions? Okay. Nancy, anything further you want to add?
Just one more comment. So overall, for that average residential customer, we'll be looking at a dollar increase of about $6.16 per month on that MPS portion of the utility bill, which is about a 5.1% overall increase in the MPS electric and water portion of the bill.
Okay. Any further questions? Could I have a motion, please, to accept item 9D?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Now that brings us down to item 10, which we took back again. That's to approve the amendment of the 115 kV transmission line easement with the city of Moorhead for Macara Industrial Park. William, are you speaking to this?
Yes, I can speak to this, and it has been worked on with Travis. He had a meeting out of town, and John Bolger has been working on this as well. And it's my understanding, and Cindy is here actually too, so if there's questions, we can kind of tag team on getting this. This was previously discussed with the commission. This has to do with a 115,000 volt transmission line that has a 110-foot easement in the Moorhead Industrial Park. There is a potential new business that would locate in one of the lots out at the in the park, and it would be advantageous for them to have us relinquish a portion of our 110-foot easement in order to build a structure there. As I mentioned, Travis Schmidt, our electrical engineering manager, I think Joe has been involved in this as well, and John Bolger have been working with the city to try and work that through. If you looked at the map, and I don't expect you to understand it very, very clearly, but on that 110-foot easement, typically the line would be placed like right in the middle of that. Fortunately for this, in this case, the transmission line, there's actually a small ditch on the north side of the easement, and the transmission line is actually located a bit north of center. So actually relinquishing 35 feet will still allow the transmission line to be to be 100 or 55 feet away, which is good news. What we have drafted, and John Bolger and John Shockley's office have been negotiating an agreement adjusting that easement. Basically, we're going to sell to the city 35 feet of that easement for about $700. And they will give us a release of liability clause in that agreement. That's one of the things that they've been wrestling over. And it sounds like earlier today we did get agreement on the agreement. So what we're looking to have you do is approve the easement subject to John Bolger's final approval and the city council's final approval. And yeah, and that's the recommendation.
Okay, I think there was another question too on the interpretation clause that was placed in the second draft.
Yeah, there was an interpretation clause in the agreement that came back from the city attorney, and John Bolger didn't like that language, and that language has been agreed to be removed.
Okay.
So
Okay, so what you're asking us to do is to approve, in theory, this easement, subject to the approval of our legal counsel.
yes, and the big issue here is that we like to have at least a 100-foot easement. We've kind of standardized on 110-foot easements in West Fargo and throughout this process of expanding our transmission system. And so this will give us 110 minus 35 feet. So what's that, 85 feet or 75 feet? What we're going to try and do is we're actually going to be working with the landowner to the north, which happens to be Pactiv Corporation, and try and get that other 35 feet so we can still maintain a 110-foot easement.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Are we going to receive further requests for diminution of our easement in the future?
Very possibly, and this is where I need Cindy's help, there's a few more lots that I believe are west of this lot that are in the same situation.
Hi, Cindy. Would you please identify yourself with everybody at home?
Sure. Cindy Graffio, Executive Director of Moorhead EDA. At this point in time, we do not anticipate any future requests. The easement that we're specifically referring to impacts these two smaller parcels, the Molesness and the right of first refusal for Regals. But the other parcels that this easement impacts are large parcels that are more easily accommodated, and businesses have approved site plans for those D&M D&M doors, and then H&S contracting. 11-acre parcel, more easily worked around. The two parcels that we're more concerned about adjusting this easement on are 2.5-acre parcels. So this easement impacts about approximately 40% of the buildable area of that parcel. So being able to reduce it by 35 feet allows the building project to go forward.
Okay. Members of the commission, any questions, any comments? John?
In your summary, Bill, here you have updated to amendments of easements dated November 7th. So if I'm looking this correctly, the city has asked us to give an easement. The city has said they prefer not to help us obtain the 110 feet that we normally have. Is there any explanation why the city would not help us obtain those easements?
Well, I think we already have the 110 feet, do we not?
No,
Well, we have now, but we're going to
We
relinquish
have it now, but
35.
the city's asked us to relinquish
the bottom half.
35 feet or whatever that number is,
That's
correct?
right.
So it'll be this one parcel that's going to have a reduced width.
Right, but still, my question is that the city requested that we give that to them, and then you had said that the city staff preferred not to obtain those easements for Moorhead Public Service. And I'm just curious as far as what their rationale for asking us to give something and then not helping getting easements to maintain what we normally have.
I can
Can you help
provide
that?
clarity on that, absolutely. When discussions between Travis and I started on this, that was one of the options that he had presented if the city would be willing to approach Pactiv. Essentially, what our request was is if there was a way that we could make this agreement between your governing body and city council, so that way this building project wouldn't be contingent on another organization's approval. If that was the stipulation that we had to secure Pactiv's agreement to sell that parcel, that may have made this building project prohibitive. So for the sake of, speed and, being able to respond to a business's request, we were hoping that we could work out an agreement between the two governing bodies where we retained control of those negotiations.
And then the final item would be, in here you reference city staff. It would be my personal preference if you just list of those who staff members you're dealing with versus just generic city staff.
Sure, okay.
I do have one question.
Rolf?
Thank you. I'm trying to be polite here.
I saw that. I was very
It's
impressed.
a new Ralph.
Doesn't happen often.
If for some reason we don't come to an agreement with Pactiv or any of the other northern landowners, if you look at the line here, it doesn't impact our line, right? I mean, the line is still up. We just don't have enough space on the northern part if something were to happen, it were to fall over, or we need to get into it, right?
Right.
The line is
Right.
fine. It
The
just-
line is fine. There's actually a small ditch there that gets us about 10 feet, and then there's basically just open area north of there. So I don't anticipate a problem, but again, precedent-wise, we still like to have that amount of land.
So from an operations standpoint, we will still be able to fully service our lines with no problems. Is that correct? Joe's nodding his
nodding
head.
his head,
I
yeah.
thought I'd go out to the source.
Well, and if you look at the map, I mean, there's the Pactiv parcel, and then there's 6 more parcels there, and there's 3 of them that look like have buildings actually very close to the line anyway, so we may not get the 55 to the north on the full
Yeah.
length anyway.
Joe's familiar with the area, so I
I
thought I
see
would
that.
pull him
I
up
see him
here.
coming down even as we speak.
Joe Moore, manager of electric operations. With the 55 feet on the south side and them not building past that, we have east and west access, so we will be able to do that. As you say, if something did happen and say it was a south storm that came and took the line going north, as Bill said, I think there's actually more than 10 feet there. And with what Pactiv has done with their growth in the past, they've gone east. And all their parking lots are set up to the south, and there's just a huge area yet to the south yet. So for right now and for the attainable future, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay.
Good, thanks.
Is there a time frame on this in terms of our getting this executed and signed and so forth? Because we don't want to slow the process down in terms of economic development. At the same time, we have to make sure that we're protecting our interests.
We are trying very hard. Hopefully, with your board's approval tonight, I'll be able to take this agreement to City Council on the 14th. Molesness Properties is willing to close at a moment's notice. They're hoping to get the footings in yet this fall. With the favorable weather, that's still possible. However, if any approvals are delayed and go into December, unfortunately, they would then have the option of walking away. Their purchase agreement would expire mid-November.
Okay. Bill, how long before we will have the final draft of this document ready for you to present to her?
It's probably about ready now. I mean, John, I believe, has worked out the details today.
At 4:15, Sarah provided an updated draft to John, so I do believe we're in the final stages, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, John's in this week, so I'm guessing tomorrow.
Okay. That's good. And I'm around tomorrow if you need my signature, so.
Okay.
Okay? Very good. Thank you.
I move to approve the amendment subject to council's final review. Is that the way we do it?
Which council are you referring to?
Ours.
SEL or CIL?
Oh, good point. Mr. Bolger.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
or Bolger, yeah.
Is there a second to that motion? Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. We've got about 20 minutes before we start our public hearing, correct?
Yes.
So we'll just take a break for about 20 minutes. So I asked him if he's ready, and he leaves the building. Quite a vote of confidence there.
Well, Kate's, I need Nancy there.
It's now 5:30. This is the time set for our public hearing with regard to our rules and for rate hearings. And I'm going to read at this time the rules governing the conduct of these hearings. No rate change shall be adopted by the commission unless the commission first holds a public hearing, affording all affected parties a chance to participate. A notice of said hearing shall be published in the official newspaper of the city at least 14 days prior to the date set for the hearing. The notice shall indicate the purpose for, the time, date, and place of the hearing. The hearing shall be conducted by the president or a member selected by the commission. At the hearing, the commission and its staff shall present the facts establishing the need for and the reasonableness of the proposed rate change. Sufficient time shall be allowed to enable all interested persons to be heard, but the commission shall determine when all relevant testimony has been presented or when testimony has become repetitious. Testimony will be considered only after a speaker has been recognized and she or he has identified himself. For the 30 days subsequent to the closing of the hearing and prior to the adoption of a rate change, written testimony shall be received and considered by the commission. The commission may grant extensions prior to the adoption of the rate change if it finds that additional testimony is necessary or productive. After all relevant testimony has been submitted, the commission shall adopt rates which it determines to be necessary and reasonable, including the effective date, and cause the same to be published in the official newspaper of the city. If there's anybody here that is going to be heard tonight on the subject of these open hearings, please make sure that your name and address and so forth is identified on the sheets outside the room. At this point, I would like a motion, please, to open the electric rate hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We have now opened the electric rate hearing. Bill, would you like to present your comments?
I certainly will, and I'll ask Nancy to queue up the PowerPoint. Okay. And if they could maybe, well, why don't you make that big screen? We couldn't get that. Oh, okay. So it'll be that size? That's fine. Okay. It is what it is. This is the electric rate hearing, and basically my presentation will be a presentation for the need for those electric rates to be increased. Next slide, Nancy. The first slide is how are the rates determined, and basically I've got just a few bullets there, and I'll kind of generally go through them. We do cost of service studies from time to time. We have cost of service based rates. We are a not-for-profit entity, so I mean over time, once our reserves are where we want them to be, we basically there's not a profit motive here. We'll talk about the city transfers a bit later, and if there's any profit, basically that's what it is. We do long-range planning, and under that section that talks about long-range planning, there's a number of costs that are generally the large areas that we talk about. Purchase power and transmission is our largest cost. And we'll have pie charts later that kind of show this, but that's about 50% of our costs. The city of Moorhead transfers are the second largest cost, and we actually have an agreement where a couple of our commissioners and a couple of the council people have a 4-year agreement, and we can talk about that in the future. We have operating expenditures, which are just our operating costs. Then we have capital improvement plans that are much different on the electric side versus the water side, but basically water and electric pipes and those types of things. And then our reserves. Our budget committee does an annual in-depth review. It's about a 4-month process. Then we have what we're having tonight, a rate increase proposal. Hopefully in the future sometime we'll have a rate decrease proposal as well. But tonight it's a rate increase proposal. We have a public hearing, which is what we're doing tonight. And then in December, as the president outlined, we'll have a final approval. So, I mean, what we're doing tonight is gathering information, listening to comments, and then we will deliberate over that for the next month and, you know, come up with what we feel what the commission feels is appropriate for funding our operations. Next one, Nancy. So what are we funding on the electric side, or what is this rate increase funding? We talked about this a little bit earlier in the meeting, but with the commission, but for the rate hearing, I'll repeat it. We are in the final year of a 3-year phase-in of a 5% rate increase that we were using to cover our costs in cost increases in 2015, and those were generally purchase power increases. So we had basically I believe a 1, a 2, and a 2% increase, or no, 1, 2.5, 2.5. It seems like, oh yeah, because when you spread them out, you end up having to have a little bit more of an increase. So basically, part of the increase for this year is the 2.5% increase from previous expenditures or increases in purchase power costs that we pushed back a bit. We're also doing a number of electric extensions for new areas of town, Oakport, and then new areas on the south and east part of town. We're also replenishing reserves and making up for some costs that we had to take our power plant down on Elm Street. We've got a number of items that the next couple of bullets deal with transmission costs, and we've had transmission cost increases that have been very substantial because Western Area Power Administration has now gone into what they call the Southwest Power Pool. And the Southwest Power Pool is a market, and there's actually a lot of costs that are being shifted around. And generally, we've, over the past few years, we thought we'd have somewhat of a windfall. Actually, the costs have increased, and we're basically at a break even right now. So some of these increases are increases in our purchase power costs, some of them are transmission costs, and then some of them are actually to make up for reductions in transmission costs that now have gone back up. So, and then we do fund city transfers, and under the agreement, the general fund transfer was going up by $125,000, and then our 5% capital improvement fund transfer makes up the difference to make up that $255,000 projected increase in transfers. So anyway, that's a long explanation for what we're funding. Next one, Nancy. So we'll start with residential rate increases. Generally, it is a 4.5% overall increase that we're looking at for residential and commercial customers. That's spread between a customer charge and a commodity charge or an energy charge. And one is a fixed per month charge, that's a customer charge. And generally those cover a lot of the fixed costs that we have in the operation. And then there's the energy charge, which covers a lot of the variable costs in the operation. You can see that the customer charge is going up more substantially, and so the energy charge is going up less. And that generally is so that we can keep a good balance between our fixed and variable cost coverages. Next slide. So this gets into the residential customer again and what increase they'll see. generally, again, the 4.5% increase ends up being a $4.10 per month increase. And the table here shows how the customer charge goes up by $2.40 on average for a customer, and then the electric consumption based on 850 kilowatt hours per month, and again, that's an average. That goes up by $1.70 per month, which the 240 and the 170 then equals the 410. Someone with a larger home may be larger than the 850 kilowatt hours per month, and then someone with a smaller home and less usage would have a smaller impact. Next page. Now we get into some of the non-residential rates. We basically have residential, and then we have small general service and general service. General service is the larger customers. Small general service is obviously the smaller ones. I'm not going to go into detail on those proposed rates, but generally, again, it's a 4.5% overall increase. It's for the general service, it's spread between an energy charge and a demand charge. Demand is just how fast you're using the energy. The energy charge is based on how much energy that you used. We do try and contact our largest customers in order to help talk with them about how this is going to impact them, and then we usually get comments and have a discussion about this. And we bring that back to our budget committee, and then we wrestle over what that should be. Next page, Nancy. This sheet, and I've got it for both the electric and the water rate hearings, this is looking at an average residential customer, what the impact is for all of what Moorhead Public Service provides, which is electricity and water. This is the impact to an average residential customer, showing the proposed electric charges and water charges. And so the net impact for electric increase is that $4.10, and then the water rate increase that we're going to talk about after this rate hearing is closed is a $2.06 monthly impact. The total then of the $4.10 and the $2.06 is $6.16, and the net impact of the electric and water increases on a percentage basis. I've talked about it a number of times here. 4.5% for electric. We're looking at a 6.5% for water, and the blended of those two increases for an average customer would be about 5% increase. The next chart talks about where your payment goes, and this is generally, this is done for a average residential customer, but it also applies to a commercial customer as well. The largest expense that Moorhead Public Service has on our electric division is purchase power and transmission, and that's about 53% of that pie chart. So the blue is that. Next in red is our second largest expense on the electric side, and that's the city transfer at 20%. And that can vary from year to year, but it generally stays right around that 20%. And actually, under the charter, could actually go up to 25%. The next items are all very similar and make up the last 0.25%. So you've got capital expenditures, both financed and ones that are not financed, salaries, wages, and benefits. And then we do have the smallest one there is where we're looking to increase reserves. So there's a slice of the pie that sometimes doesn't exist if we're not accumulating reserves, but we are accumulating some reserves in order to meet our reserve policy of the commission. Next slide is talking about what, how our 2017 increase, how does that compare historically? And actually, it's the highest of this 10-year period. We've had a couple of 4% earlier on, and what we're looking at here is a 4.5% increase. Excuse me. And I'll just mention, since it's the largest one on there, that it does make the Budget Committee uncomfortable to have that increase be that large, and they are looking at, if there's any costs that we can actually hold off on or not do entirely, or is there any way for us to spread that out over the next few years? Now, again, we did that a couple of years ago where we spread it out. We got the 2015, 16, and then the 17 was supposed to be a 2.5% increase. When we get purchase power increases that are substantial, which probably aren't that substantial, but added to that 2.5% increase, it kind of put us in a tough bind there. So we are looking at whether or not we can spread that out over the next couple of years. But that gives you just an idea of the rate plan for the commission for the past and then for the next few years. The next slide, the final slide on the electric rate hearing, is how our rates compare to other utilities. Now, this is a residential rate comparison. I don't have in the presentation the commercial rate comparison. That varies too much depending on the load factor and the demand and energy components of the commercials. But for the residential, this is just a good benchmark. In the past, we used to be lower than XL Fargo. Now we're showing that we're higher than XL Fargo, but lower than the other ones in Minnesota. So good news, bad news, we're the lowest of the utilities in Minnesota, but we're not lower than XL Fargo. And that is a benchmark that we look at closely and we keep track of. And, so we're working on that. That's it for that one. And then now I would send it back to our chairman.
Before we open this up to anybody who wants to make comments this evening, the net impact of it, look at your chart on page 7, is $6.16, which most of this doesn't sound like a whole heck of a lot. But you stop to consider this year's increase for Social Security recipients in the United States, for most people on fixed income, is about half of that. So for those people on fixed income in this community, they'll get a $3 increase, but then a $6 increase in terms of our rates, and that's before we tack on any other city rates that go with our bill as well. So, let's put things a bit in perspective if we can. Is there anybody who would like to?
Well, maybe if I may make another point too.
Yes.
I mean, there's one thing to look at the residential customer, but then there's the commercial customer who will see a much larger
increase.
dollar number,
Yep.
right? It's the same percentage, but a much larger dollar number. So as we were discussing this as part of the budget committee as well, I mean, and as Bill said as well, we're going to do what we can to make sure that we keep that any increase as low as possible. And as Bill said, this is a non-for-profit, so we're not making money off this, but we need to pay for expenses, and as we all know, we need to work on the reserves because of multiple issues. But we have another 30 days to actually go through this. So when we talk about 4.5 and 6.5 on the water, especially the 4.5, and as we talked in our meeting earlier, we're going to try to do what we can to get that lower than 4.5. So.
Okay. Anybody else? Does anybody have any comments that they would like to make? Come on down. Please identify yourself for everybody at home.
Well, good afternoon. I'm John Larson. I'm the plant manager of the Pactive plant in South Moorhead.
Welcome, John.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to make some comments here today in regards to the rate increases that have been proposed. So I've been in the position since just early September at Pactiv. My wife and I are lifelong residents of Moorhead. For the most part, we were in Oakport, so this is our home as well. But in the little bit of time I've been at Pactiv, I realized that the relationship between Pactiv, the City of Moorhead, and the MPS has always been very good. So we thank you for that, especially for the help we received after the fire in 2012. So as you probably already know, Pactiv is Moorhead Public Service's second largest customer in terms of load factor, and we're probably about an 80% load factor. So Pactiv's rate increases, less the economic incentives we've got over the years, have averaged about 2.2% per year for the last 6 years, which has been about $44,000 a year for us, okay? 2017, the proposed rate increases will increase our rate by 4.11%. This is almost double the historical rate increase. The demand charges, the proposed dollar per kilowatt increase, which is about a 5.5% increase, is almost 2.5 times the actual average increase of 41 cents per kilowatt hours over the last 6 years. And then probably our biggest concern, and we were talking a little bit about it beforehand, is the city transfer fees of 20%. When we look at that, that appears extremely high for us and actually represents several $100,000 to us. But we also look at that, and the national average for transfer fees is about 5%. So that's a huge number for us. So what we're asking for, if there can be some consideration for that line item as well. So our recommendation at the end of the story would be that we would recommend that in line with what you projected last year, about a 2.5% increase would be more in line for us, and we would hope that could be proposed and accepted by the commission. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Any questions for me?
Members of the commission?
Thank you.
Okay.
What are you experiencing in other locations for Pactiv?
You know, I don't have that information, but I can certainly get that. If that's something that you'd like to have, I can get that back to you.
Assuming your company nationwide is very sensitive to
Very sensitive.
related issues.
Very, very sensitive.
John?
Did you calculate the cost increase that's going to result in the proposed?
For a total, no, I didn't, John, but I can do that. Okay.
Anybody else? Okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Yep.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak this evening? Is there anybody else who would like to make any comments relative to the proposed electric rate increases? Okay, I'd like to have a motion then, please, to close the electric rate hearing.
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. I'd like to now ask for a motion to open the water rate hearing.
Move to open the water rate hearing, please.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And Bill, I'm assuming you're going to make much the same type of a presentation as you just did.
Very similar, thank you. But not any less important. This is, we're going to talk about water rates right now. So the next slide or next presentation there, Nancy, okay? And you can go to the next slide. And the format here is, it is very similar. So we do cost of service studies, and we do have cost of service-based rates on the water side as well. We do those studies generally every 5 to 7 years. We've got 2012 rate study that we're working on right now, or that we're using. And the next rate study is 2017. We do long-range planning, again, for the water division. And as in the electric side, we've got some bullets there where we basically talk about operating expenditures. Chemicals are a big part of that. Capital improvements are a big factor for the water side. We have a water asset management plan that we've talked about quite a bit here, and we've got other capital improvements that I'll talk about in the future, or in the next few slides. And then we have, again, reserves, which on the water side, we actually, the reserves are full, so that's good news. The Budget Committee takes a look at it in depth. We do the proposal, which we're doing tonight, have a hearing, and then we have final approval again in December. So Next slide, what are we funding? About $18 million over the next 5 years, $8 million of water main replacements, and this is based on our water main asset management plan. The commissioners reviewed that plan a number of times. You'll hear across the country that the infrastructure is in dire condition, or dire straits, I was going to say. And we are on top of that. We actually have a lot of cast iron main that will be replaced over the next decade. And then beyond that, there'll be other types of main that will need replacing. So the commission has spent a lot of time on this one. We could talk about this for quite a while, but it is in a very important area. The other items that are listed here, we do have $3.8 million earmarked to build a south side water tower and water transmission line, and that is based on growth. So if we don't see the growth, we can push those expenditures back. And then we do have $6.5 million for other facilities upgrades and equipment and those types of things. So for instance, our water treatment facility is over 20 years old now, and we have to do some work in that facility. There's new regulations all the time that we end up having to deal with, and the number one bullet there, constructing new sludge ponds, is because of new regulations that are upon us. And we've got other things that are down there that are, well, the expansion of our Buffalo wells and those types of things are, some of that is actually not even included in here. So we might have some, we could have some additional capital improvements that aren't even listed in here. But this rate increase is funding these types of expenditures over the next 5 years. Next slide is what the proposed water rates are doing to the monthly customer charge. So the monthly customer charge is based on meter size. Residential customers are generally the 5/8 inch and 3/4 inch meters. And the other ones are more small commercial and commercial customers. So the proposed rates are increased based on size, and they're generally in the 5 to 7% range. Next slide, the volume charge. Again, our rates, both on electric and water side, are made up of customer charges and then a commodity charge. So the volume charge here is based on how many gallons of water or cubic feet of water is used. And you'll see that there's residential, apartments, commercial, and industrial customers. And each of those has, they have summer and winter rates. Summer rates generally are higher than winter rates, and that is because that's when we're taxing the system more, is in the summertime. For residential, for commercial and industrial, it may be not the same case, because their usage is more flat. And then on the residential side, there is a conservation rate that I won't go into detail on, but it's based on your winter average. And then if you use 150% or more of your winter average, then there's an additional charge. Those are generally going up by 6.5% total commodity and customer charge. So you'll see these vary a bit between 5 and 11%. So the next slide is the impact on the average residential customer, and that increase will be about $2.06 per month. Again, it's a 6.5% increase. Not as much impact because it's a lower dollar amount, but the customer's general bill will go from a total of about $31 a month to $33.50 per month, or $31.50 to $33.50, and that's for a customer using about 600 cubic feet or 4,500 gallons per month. Of course, if you use more or less than that, that'll make that amount vary. Next slide is fire protection. There is a a fire protection fee that's been phased in, or that's being phased in over an 8-year period. This is the 5th year of the phase-in. It's another one of those pesky fees you see on the bill. It's called a fire protection fee. And for a residential customer, that's going from $1.05 to $1.25 per month. Commercial, apartments, and industrial are listed there. And this goes to pay for a portion of the infrastructure that provides fire protection. Next slide is the pie chart showing where the money goes. So an average customer pays $31.42. And where does that go? On the water side, it's a little more distributed evenly. The top item in green there is capital items that are not financed. If you add that to the orange one, that's really the capital expenditures. So that's the largest two categories, or makes up the largest category, is capital improvements. Number 2 is salary and wages. Number 3 is kind of a tie between chemicals, principal and interest, and other operating expenses. But that just gives you a general idea of where the money goes for water. The next slide is one that you've seen before, because it shows the impact to the overall residential customer. And again, with the electric charges being about $94 and the water charges being $33, the total is $128. And that increase is about $6.16. And the percentage increase, again, is we're looking at a 4.5 for electric, 6.5 for water, and the overall impact is about a 5% increase. Next slide, Nancy, then. Electric increases look great compared to this one, because we have a series of 6.5% increases, and a lot of that is because of our water main asset management plan and the Commission's plan to upgrade infrastructure, especially those cast iron mains. It's very costly to have cast iron main, water main breaks that need to be fixed, especially when it's wintertime. It's terrible to have the streets flooded, and then you have to repair the street. So what we're doing is, and you've seen it here in the downtown area of Moorhead, a lot of cast iron. In fact, most of the cast iron in downtown Moorhead has now been replaced because of the last years or 2 years construction that's been occurring. So anyway, we're in the 3rd year of 5 of 6.5% water increases. Then we're hoping that those will go back down to, those between 1 and 3% increases.
Or 0.
Or 0, yep. Okay, the rate increase, the rates, how they compare to other utilities. On the water side, we're kind of in the middle of the pack. We're a little bit above Grand Forks and Fargo, and we are less than Fergus Falls, East Grand Forks, and Thief River Falls. Again, this is for a residential customer. Commercial, industrial would vary differently. And with that, I'll give it back to you.
If I can ask you to go back to the 2017 fire protection rates that are identified on page 7 of this. It indicates here that we're in the 5th year of an 8-year plan to phase in the City of Moorhead's request to build fire protection costs through MPS. So is this our charge or is it a city charge?
This is, well, Nancy, you might have a better answer on this one. I mean, it's a city charge, isn't it?
Fire protection is normally a City of Moorhead or a city function, and so we look at it that way here. And what happened the last time we did our water rate study, because of the limitations in the Moorhead Charter to only collect 40 $40 annually for each fire hydrant that's placed in Moorhead. The charter limits us to that. This fee then recoups the rest of the costs for building the infrastructure large enough to serve the fire hydrants and to serve the fire protection.
So this
of the
is in
city of
fact
Moorhead.
our charge, not the city's charge, because this goes into more public service.
It is part of our rate structure, right,
Okay.
right.
Anybody have any other questions? David?
Might be repeating myself, or the question, is that a dedicated fund then? Is that the fire protection fund, is that a fund then?
It is not a fund, it is just part of the water revenues, but it's dedicated to the infrastructure or the building of the mains and everything of the assets to serve the fire protection function. It is not separated out and
So it's in the
held as a
general
separate fund. No, it's MPS revenues
Right. In the water fund?
in the water fund, yes.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
More on that later.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there anybody wishing to be heard on the issue of the water rate, proposed water rate changes? Does anybody want to make any comments at this time? Anybody at all? Okay. Could I have a motion, please, to close the water rate hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That rate hearing is closed. I should tell everybody, both the people here and the people at home, that we do want your comments. John, we appreciate you appearing before us this evening. We take your comments very seriously. And written comments will be received for 30 days from the date of this hearing, and no action will be taken on the rates until 30 days from the date of this rate hearing. For comments to be considered by the commission, written comments should be postmarked no later than Wednesday, December 7, 2016, and mailed to the Public Service Commission, P.O. Box 779, Moorhead, Minnesota 56561-0779. A formal decision regarding the rate structure will be determined at the commission's meeting on or about December 13, 2006. And additional information can also be viewed at our website, which is www.mpsutility.com. And again, I received comments from people in the past who simply send me an email, and that works as well, and our email addresses are on the website. So we do encourage people in this community to make comments because we are owned by this community and the people that are served by Moorhead Public Service. With that, this meeting is adjourned.